here because somebody made a choice long ago that they wanted you to live.
Together, we march for life. In unity, we lift our voices for truth.
The march was really inspiring. It really opened our eyes to how amazing life really is and how many people support the pro-life movement and all the babies and the mothers and the fathers.
Every child deserves to be born. Every child deserves to have a voice.
On January 22nd, stand up for those who have been silenced. Speak up for those who cannot yet speak. Join the March for Life and be a voice for the voiceless.
Welcome once again to another edition of Christian Answers. My name is Jeff Short, and today we're going to be talking about the anniversary of the 1973 decision, Roe v. Wade, that legalized abortion in all 50 states here in the United States. It's been many, many years. It's been a number of decades now since this sweeping decision made abortion legal in all 50 states. And today is January 22nd. I don't know when you're watching this video, but today is January 22nd. This is the very day, the anniversary of that terrible Roe v. Wade decision that basically gave license to murder here in the United States. Now, before the Roe v. Wade decision, there were abortions that were being performed, and there were some states that allowed for abortions, and there were many other states that made it illegal for an abortion. But then after Roe v. Wade, after that terrible Supreme Court decision in 1973, all 50 states had to allow for abortion, legal abortion. And we see now today that many, many, many decades later, how disastrous this has been. One would have thought if there was any degree of sanity, any degree of wisdom, any degree of resolution in that decision by the Supreme Court, then the country would have simply accepted the decision and moved on to other things. After all, there are all kinds of other issues that need our attention, even moral issues. But that is not the case with this Roe v. Wade decision. Our country has not moved on. After many, many, many decades, it has not moved on at all. In fact, right now there is a march being planned for this coming Friday in Washington, D.C. It's usually held on the 22nd, but as you know, this year there was an inauguration that was held on the 21st, or the 20th, and that made it necessary to delay for about a week the pro-life rally because of simply the congestion and the timing and everything. So, but normally it's held on the 22nd of January of every year. People from all over the country come into Washington and show their disappointment, disapproval of this horrendous abortion policy here in the United States. And the problem is that, like I said before, you would have thought this would have been something that people would have moved on because of the way the Supreme Court decisions usually act. They make a decision, then people accept it and then move on. But this is such a terrible crime. This is such a terrible travesty that people are not moving on, and Christians cannot move on. There's no way to move on to murder. This is child murder. This is child sacrifice. This is baby murdering. And it's been legal now for many, many, many decades. I remember the first time I became aware of the abortion problem in our country was back in 1983, I think it was, 82, 83. I was a student at Wheaton College, and I attended a pro-life group that met every week. I began to learn about abortion. I couldn't believe what was taking place. I couldn't believe that they were actually killing babies. Before that, I guess I hadn't even thought about it. It didn't even comprehend in my mind that a woman would actually go to some kind of an abortion clinic and have the doctor kill her baby. It never occurred to me. I guess I had heard the word before, but it was not part of even my mental radar until I started learning about it. And then I remember after I attended a meeting of the Illinois Citizens for Life that was meeting at the campus on that Wheaton College at that time, I attended it and I began to become aware of what was taking place. And I said, I've got to learn about this. And so on top of all of my other studies at Wheaton College, I began to purchase, I think I went out and bought about 3 or 4 or 5 books on abortion, began to read up, trying to get myself educated to learn what this is. And the more and more I learned about what abortion is and how it's performed and all of the gruesome details, I was totally shocked at our country would actually allow this violence to take place. I didn't comprehend it before. Then when I learned about it, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that here in the borders of this country, because I always thought the United States was a place, home of the free and justice and liberty for all, and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I just assumed that if there was something really, really, really bad, the United States wouldn't stand for that. This would not stand in our country. That would happen maybe in some of these other places like communist Russia or China, where they forced people to do things. But in the United States, I never thought that we would be a nation that would actually sanction open murder, deliberate murder, cold-blooded murder. And that's what's happening with the situation with abortion. As I began to read up and get myself educated and learn about what abortion really is, it is a terrible crime. And you know what's worse? Now, these many, many years later, that was in '83 when I began to learn about abortion. We're talking 20, 30, 40 years later. Now we're talking about 30 to 40 years later, we're talking about all of the women who have undergone an abortion. And this is another tragedy. Of course, the first tragedy is the baby in the womb is dead. The baby in the womb is murdered. That's the first tragedy. That's the first victim of abortion. But then you look around this nation right now, and over the last 3 decades, over the last 3.5 decades, you see that millions of women have had abortions. And I don't know the percentage. I don't know if anybody really knows the percentage, but it could be rising up to the level of maybe 1/4 of the women in this country. 25% of the women in this country have had abortions. Many women have had more than 1, 2, 3, 4, some 5, 6. It's a terrible thing. What that means is you have 1/4 of the women in this nation. You're talking about millions and tens of millions of women in this nation walking around with the guilt and the knowledge that they murdered their baby. They paid a doctor to kill their baby. Now, I know in the presidential debates between Clinton and Trump, there was sort of this debate about what happens if you change Roe v. Wade and you outlaw abortion. If some states outlaw it, I think the latest policy plan would be that you throw Roe v. Wade out, you scrap it, you overturn it. If you have enough justices in the Supreme Court, you revisit Roe v. Wade, you totally dismantle Roe v. Wade, and you throw abortion back to the states, which would be, that would allow these radical abortion states to continue abortion, but then it would allow the states that have more sane and moral understanding of what is taking place, they would be able to outlaw it, ban it completely. And so then you would have a more equitable and fair policy that would allow moral people and populations to not have to put up with this. Right now, moral populations, Christian towns, Christian villages, people, overwhelmingly Christian territories have to have an allowance for abortion. They have to allow it because it's the law of the land. Now, under the current proposal, possibly if Roe v. Wade is overturned, then we could throw it back to the states. And again, like I said, you would have some states that would totally ban it. Many states, hopefully all states, but that would be a stretch. There are states like New York and California, for example, they are probably as committed to this as anything else to allowing abortion. So you might have a few states that would just never, ever give it up. But at least you would have a huge amount of people and states that would give up abortion entirely, which would be a blessing because, as we know, God is not going to bless any people that allow the murder of their unborn children. He just will not allow it. He will not bless it. He will, long range, the people who allow murder, abortion, will go down in destruction. It happened with the wicked city of Sodom and Gomorrah. That city could get away with it for a little while, but suddenly, at a moment's notice, God brought judgment upon that city, and that's what's going to happen to this country if we don't change our policy. We have to change our policy. Well, I began to learn about what abortion was back in my college days, and I began to pray for the end of abortion, and I have prayed for the end of abortion almost on a daily basis for the last 30-some years. I have been praying. I've been praying for presidents that would elect Supreme Court justices that would overturn this. I've been praying for Supreme Court justices that they would vote the right way. And it's been a very hard 3.5 decades to actually see the Supreme Court stubbornly cling to its Roe v. Wade decision. I mean, one of the biggest disappointments that I saw, and that happened very early on, right during the time that I was at Wheaton College back in the 80s, was when Ronald Reagan, who was a pro-life, supposedly a pro-life candidate, appointed Sandra Day OConnor. Now, everyone was saying to him in the Christian community, hey, this woman cannot be trusted. We don't see enough evidence that she is a solid pro-life justice who will respect human life. Ronald Reagan, oh, it's going to be okay. You're going to be happy with the way she votes. Just trust me on this. So Christians trusted Ronald Reagan, our president, and sure enough, Sandra Day OConnor, when it came time to vote to overturn Roe v. Wade and question the Roe v. Wade decision, she voted to uphold it. She voted for the status quo. She did exactly opposite of what we were praying and hoping. We voted in Ronald Reagan to try to get the abortion ruling changed. He appointed a Supreme Court justice who was not pro-life. So we have this very discouraging scenario. And we've gone through all these many, many years, every election cycle. We have this big push to try to get people elected who are pro-life. And we've been pushing and praying and working all these many years, these many decades, and still we have abortion with us. And frankly, I don't know at this point whether we're ever going to see any kind of change in the Roe v. Wade ruling. But we have to keep on praying. We have to keep on trying at least. And even if we go to our graves without seeing any kind of change in the law, at least we can put the pressure and keep saying, we tried. That's what we have to do as decent people. You cannot let evil simply win. You cannot let evil simply take over and just lay down and die and just let it take over. You have to resist evil, even if you don't see the change in your lifetime. So they're having a March for Life in about a week or so, and they're going to protest again abortion. They're going to hold the new president to his promises. He promised that he would appoint pro-life Supreme Court justices, and now we're going to hold him to that. He has to come through for that. He has to do that. because that's what he promised. Now, if he can appoint one or possibly two, we only need one, but possibly two would help, pro-life justices who are really pro-life, we might be able to see in the next few years Roe v. Wade overturned. But at the same time, you have people who are sensing the possibility of overturning Roe v. Wade, and they're really getting angry and mad because they don't want it overturned. That's the radical feminists and the liberal progressives, the entire Democratic Party, the Democratic establishment, the people who just see this as almost the litmus test to progress in society. They had a rally the day after the inauguration. It was called a Women's March on Washington, and the estimates were 1 million women attended this. 1 million women, which is even more. 1 million people is more than attended the inauguration itself for our president. But 1 million women marched on Washington, and it was a total profanity-laced, angry, mean-spirited rally. It's incredible. I watched some of the video clips of this. They had people like Madonna stand up there, and for like 5 minutes, her foul mouth. It was just, you can't even repeat what these women were saying. And I'm thinking, this is their movement? Their movement is foul-mouthed and dirty and angry and hate-filled. And they're trying to say that people are attacking them because we want a law that says no more baby killing. And the women who marched on Washington, 1 million of them, were saying, no, we must have the right to kill our babies. We must have the right to murder. They want the right. They want the right to cold-blooded murder. It cannot happen. It cannot exist in a civilized society that you have a group of people who have the right, the freedom, the license to simply take a human life whenever they want to, whenever they will. And that's what's happening right now with abortion. A woman can walk into an abortion clinic and pay the doctor to kill her baby. Or, what's even worse, under the past president administration, women can walk into an abortion clinic and have the government, have us pay for their abortion. And that's what the women that made this march in Washington a few days ago wanted. They want the government to pay for their abortions and the women's abortions. And they also want access to abortion expanded. In other words, they want it possible for any woman anywhere in the United States to be able to go just a short distance and kill their baby. They don't want any kind of hindrance to murder. They want a woman to have the absolute right to murder her baby at any point in the pregnancy, and they want that a very convenient access, and they want the government to pay for that. And it's just an outrage. It's an outrage that this is the United States that we live in, that there are people who are so angry and so demanding and so immoral that they will actually openly demand the right to murder their baby in the womb. And so we have to put our foot down and say this has gone so far. I mean, it's many, many years now since we've had this Roe v. Wade decisions. It's many, many years that babies have been killed. Every year, 1 million to 2 million babies are killed every year in this country. And that's just the abortions that are recorded. That's just the statistics, the official statistics. Who knows what the actual statistics are. Now, worldwide, we can't do anything about the abortion rate over there in Russia. We can't do anything about the abortions in France and Germany because we have no say in their government. We have no say in their social policy. But here in the United States, we can make a difference by our prayers and our vote. And we have voted in a president who promised and says that he will appoint pro-life judges to the Supreme Court. We need to pray that he follows through on that. We need to hold him accountable. And we need to hope that the good Lord brings about a change in this policy. Now, as Christians, we know that God can do miracles. We know that he can change the course of governments and government leaders. We look in the Bible, we see he changed the mind of Pharaoh. Pharaoh didn't want to let the children of Israel go. He wanted to keep them, hold them as slaves. But God changed his heart through a series of miracles. Finally, he said, go, Moses, take your people and leave. That was a miracle. That was a miracle. And we can see God changing the minds of leaders in the Bible in different contexts, in different situations. He can do that today. He does that today. So we need to pray that he changes the minds of the Supreme Court judges, that he changes the minds of the policymakers so that we can see an end to abortion. It's gone too far, it's gone too long, and there are people that want to maintain the Roe v. Wade status quo. And we saw that happen this past few days ago at the abortion rally in Washington, D.C. And that's what it basically was. It was entitled the Women's March on Washington, but it basically was an abortion rally. It was a pro-choice, pro-death rally where you had celebrities, Hollywood people, music entertainers, all trying to get people, encouraging them to put the pressure on Washington to maintain abortion. Now, Hollywood people, celebrities, these are not the moral leaders of our society. And yet, I heard one of the celebrities say in a speech at this pro-abortion rally a few days ago. I watched the video clip, and this woman actually said that we have a moral obligation to keep abortion legal. A moral obligation. Seeing this as a moral issue. Well, I agree with her. It is a moral issue, but it's not a moral issue to keep abortion going. It's a moral issue to stop abortion. Murder is a moral issue that you want to stop. You want to stop murders. You want to stop rape. You want to stop all of these negative things. Not perpetrate them, not perpetuate them. But the audacity of actually making abortion a moral issue for abortion, it's twisted, it's inverted, it's satanic inversion. I don't know if you know anything about Satanism, if you've ever read any reports or documentaries on Satanism. Satanism always takes Christian symbols and they flip it upside down. So you have the cross, it's turned upside down. Sometimes Satanists will try to say the Lord's Prayer backwards. Everything is inverted because in the kingdom of darkness, there's the kingdom of light, that's God, and the kingdom of darkness, that's Satan. There's the truth, and then there's the lie, and Satan is the father of lies, and God is the father of truth. And so you see the opposite. You see the rebellion. God says this, Satan says that. It's an inversion of everything good and holy and pure. That's what Satan is. He's the opposite of that. And so you see at this rally for abortion, they are claiming that abortion is a moral good and it has to be perpetrated and it has to be perpetuated. And that's an inversion. That's an inversion. And I think it's a satanic inversion. It fits the pattern. But we have to never allow those arguments, those bad arguments, those false, lying arguments to just exist out there without being challenged. So I would encourage all of you, if you don't know what abortion is, read up about it. If you don't know the, quote, procedure, and that's what these pro-abortion people always like to talk about. They like to say, well, it's just a procedure. It's a medical procedure. It's a woman's health issue. It's not any of those. It's murder. That's what the first thing we should think of when we think of abortion, murder. It's not some kind of a health issue. Very rarely is it necessary for the fetus or the baby in the womb to be taken out prematurely to the point of dying because of the complications in the health of the mother. Very rarely. That is such a small percentage of case that it's hardly even worth mentioning. The real issue is that it's murder, and that's the moral problem. And we can't let the enemy try to distort the argument and say, well, it's a health issue or it's a woman's issue. I don't think murder is a woman's issue. I don't think the right to a murder is a woman's right. Men shouldn't have the right to murder, and women shouldn't have the right to murder. Children shouldn't have the right to murder. There should be no one that has the right to murder in cold blood another person because they don't want them around. And that's what abortion is. The woman has decided she doesn't want the baby around. She doesn't think she can afford the baby, or she doesn't think she can raise the baby, or she doesn't want the baby to interfere with her time or her career or her marriage or her lifestyle or whatever. The baby is an inconvenience. That does not give you the right to murder that baby. That baby deserves respect and dignity in its own right, made in the image of God. Christianity teaches that all people are made in the image of God. And the baby in the womb is made in the image of God. And just because the baby is not outside the womb doesn't make it any less made in the image of God. Because the image of God happens at the moment of conception, because that's when that unique individual life is formed. And so we need to respect human life from the moment of conception on to the moment of death. And we need to not prematurely take the life of someone made in the image of God just because somebody, the mother, doesn't want the baby. And so we need to continue to press the argument for the moral case for ending Roe v. Wade, and pray that God in his wisdom will at some point actually get us to the point where we are no longer killing babies in the womb in this country. So I would encourage you, if you get a chance to go to one of these March for Lives every January 22nd, definitely make plans to go one of these years. If you can't watch some of the video, pray for it. And let's pray this year that God does bring about a miracle and outlaws abortion, outlaws this terrible, terrible policy that we've had in our country for now 3.5 decades. Let's end it. Let's return our nation to some semblance of morality, and let's never stop praying until that happens. Well, God bless you. We'll see you back here next week on another edition of God Bless.